for my German chocolate pound cake. I am creamed here sugar with German's 48% sweet cocoa and half a cup of Crisco. Of course, 2 sticks of margarine. Now I'm going to start adding the 5 eggs. As is common with pound cakes, they require a lot of eggs. Now what I want to do is add a cup of milk to moisten it up. I really want it to be moist before I add the flour that has the salt and baking soda in it, or the salt and baking powder in it. This flour and salt and baking powder goes in just slowly, as I want it to mix and not become so dusty. I'm going to do this, and then I'll add the flavorings, and then lastly I'll add the coconut. Okay, this German chocolate pound cake recipe calls for a teaspoon of lemon flavoring, and then also a teaspoon of vanilla flavoring. Can we get an image there? There it is. The fear with vanilla extract is that you cook it out, and so I like adding it at the very end. So the last thing I'll do now is put in the coconut, and I'll be ready to bake. This German chocolate pound cake recipe calls for a cup of nuts, but since I'm using coconut, I'm adding more than 1 cup for several reasons. 1, I just like it a lot, but 2, obviously shredded coconut is much lighter than chopped nuts. So I'm going to go with about 1.5 cups of shredded coconut for my German chocolate pound cake. What I'll do last is go ahead and grease this bundt cake pan that I have, that I like to do pound cakes in, with some Crisco, of course, and pour it in, and then bake it at 350 in the oven for about an hour. With greasing, you can almost never overdo it, so I'm going to lay this on pretty heavy. The recipe I'm using came from my grandmother Carroll's recipe box, but this particular one has a emblem of Mr. Pig here, who's the mascot for the Piggly Wiggly grocery store. The Piggly Wiggly grocery store was across the street from the Central United Methodist Church in Fitzgerald, and though my grandmother frequently shopped at Harvey's, she apparently clipped this one from the Piggly Wiggly sales paper. What I'm doing now is just lightly dusting the pan with cocoa powder, as the recipe recommends. Haven't done this before. Normally I just dust it with regular flour. Once you get a little bit in there, you kind of work it around, and it makes a look at that beautiful chocolate dusting on top of the Crisco for the cake. Okay, now that the oven's at 350, we're going to put our German chocolate pound cake in the center rack and let it bake an hour and 15 minutes, or until it is solid inside. Okay, time for the moment of truth. Dum 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 dum. Our German chocolate pound cake, we'll test it with a toothpick and make sure it's clean on the inside, cooked thoroughly. We'll let it cool, and then we'll make our icing in the meantime. According to these directions, I'm going to blend a half a box of powdered sugar. I'm not sure what that is, so I did 4 cups with a third a cup of cocoa powder, as you can see here. It says half a teaspoon of black walnut flavoring. Not sure what that is, so we're avoiding that. 1 stick of margarine, which is already in there. Some lemon juice, and then of course 1 egg, which is right there. The recipe doesn't call for preparing this, so I'm assuming that I should cook it in just a small saucepan, which is what I'll do. I'll mix everything and then I'll cook it in the saucepan, because I don't understand why it doesn't tell me to do that. Obviously raw egg is not doesn't make good icing, so we'll do that as the cake cools, and then we'll frost it. Now it's time to turn out our cake. I've let it cool completely, almost an hour, and of course I've shaken it a little bit just to feel it loose, so I know that it's completely loose. Turn that bad boy over. Let's see what comes out. Wow, look at that. Look at that. Our German's chocolate pound cake. Piggly Wiggly recipe. For our final step, we'll cover it in chocolate icing. There's a couple ways you can do this. You can spoon it out, or you can just pour it directly from the pot. Spooning is nice, it gives you a lot of control. Again, this is powdered sugar, margarine, an egg, cooked of course, coconut. Oof, look at that, that's great. And ideally a cool cake will allow that icing to firm up really quickly and not run everywhere.